You probably can't even fix the school. You might not even be able to fix the whole day in your class. But if you can get 2 kids to play 1 game of chess, you made a difference. Mm. Where is the smallest unit that you can impact? What is the smallest project you can launch? And then you get to do it again. Don't go to the principal and say, I heard about this person and I want to start a chess club. Just have 1 game of chess. And if it starts to work, then you'll have 3 games of chess. And by the time you get up to 6 games of chess, they'll ask you to start a chess club.
Right.
And so the scary part is beginning, but resistance pushes us to make it bigger in our head so that someone will say, no, okay, phew, I don't have to do it. Well, yeah, but if you made it smaller, you could do it.
Hi, it's Morgane Michael, and this is Hindsight 101, where you're going to get practical strategies for designing a life that inspires you, one life edit at a time.
Seth Godin, welcome to Hindsight 101 with me, Morgane Michael. I am so delighted to have you on for a 3rd time. Thank you for joining me today.
It always makes me better when I talk to you.
I am so excited about your new book, The Song of Significance. As soon as I learned that it was out, I downloaded it immediately. And one of my favorite ways to enjoy your work is by listening to you in my ear as I'm going for a nice long walk, because there's something meditative about walking, but then there's something about the way that you say just about everything that you say that just anchors my mindset in such a positive way, and then also in a realistic way. But I always feel so inspired after listening to you. Specifically, this book is just magical. So thank you for sharing that.
Wow. Thank you. That makes my day, my month. It means a lot to me.
I want to start right off the bat. I was really touched by your story about bees. And, my audience is largely educators. And much of the work that we do, especially post-pandemic, is to enroll students in the journey of learning. And to be honest, as a frontline educator, it has been a little bit more challenging. We're seeing some interesting sort of nuances in behavior, and some of the social emotional skills just don't seem quite as developed. I absolutely loved your story of the bees and how they find a way to work together. Can you tell that story for my audience?
Well, when I first heard it, it took my breath away. So I will shift gears soon to talk about the plight and privilege of being a teacher. But first, the bees. You're up in Canada or close enough. Winter is hard for bees. And the reason that there's honey is not so that beekeeper can be happy. The bees make honey so they will be able to survive the winter. It's their storehouse. And if they make it at the end of May through the winter, the hive is sort of ragged. There's not much food left. And it might be the end of the road. But the Council of Maidens, organizing without an organizer, the volunteer circle of leaders, will take a look at the hive and realize that they have a chance. So what they'll do is they'll instruct the queen to lay and fertilize a queen egg. The queen usually lays 800 eggs a day, but not a queen egg. And then they'll say to the rest of the hive, go out and collect as much pollen as you can. And it only takes 2 weeks to replenish all the honey in the whole hive. By this point, the new queen is almost born. And then based on the weather, the maidens will send out a signal. And in less than 15 minutes, 10,000 bees, led without a leader, will all leave the hive at the same time, leaving behind all the pips, all the babies, all the honey. They'll just leave forever. And that leap, which Jacqueline Freeman calls the song of increase, is thrilling. I mean, it just fills me with excitement to imagine to be part of that. And that's what we yearn for as people, is to feel that leap. And so I know I'm ranting here, but I want to talk about the teacher thing. What you said very matter-of-factly is so overlooked, which is that the main job of a public school teacher is not to tell kids things that they could look up online, not to be a live version of a YouTube video. Their main job is to emotionally enroll, sign kids up to change, to become people who know something that they didn't know, to become capable of interacting in a way they didn't know how to do it. And if that's true, if people agree with that, my question is, what percentage of your day are you spending on that? And unfortunately, due to bureaucracy and curricula, not much.
Right.
Well, then why are you expecting it's not happening? Why are you surprised it's not happening? Right? That when I teach, I spend 80% of my time earning enrollment and only 20% of my time teaching, because the teaching is easy once people want to learn.
Well, that's true. Yeah, that's true. So I think about the story, and then I connect it to the fact that I think as educators, we want to feel like leaders, and in a school setting, sometimes, and you speak about this in your book, sometimes we don't always feel that way. There's an element of micromanagement. There's an element maybe of feeling a sense of fear that we just can't achieve what we want to achieve. And I think the story of the bees sort of shows us too that we can all contribute. We can all be leaders. It doesn't matter if those efforts seem like failures, but because we are all contributing, the organization is better off. And I love that idea. And I'm going into this school year with that very much in my mindset. And that has been something, the idea of building belonging, of creating a culture of individuals who truly feel like they are part of something great. And I think it's possible, but it's challenging. And so what would you say is one of the ways, or something that we can keep in mind as we set off to do that? Because I think deep down, we all want that. We do. We all want to be part of something great.
I do believe that anyone who's crazy enough to sign up to be a teacher has in their heart the desire to make a spectacular, important, lifelong change. And then the system burns it out of you. The first teachers' college in the United States, Massachusetts, was called the Normal School, which you and I have talked about. It's called the Normal School because they teach you to teach kids to be normal. And so it's very easy to get distracted from why you showed up in the first place. But culture, the culture in your classroom, is defined as, what are things like around here? So to pick an example based on recent movies, lots and lots of kids grew up playing with Barbie. There is nothing inherent in the 4 ounces of plastic that is a Barbie that made it the behemoth it became. It's just your friends were playing with Barbie, so you're playing with Barbie.
Right.
And it becomes an expectation. So when I walk into that classroom, what are things like around here? The late Lenny Levine, who was one of my son's kindergarten teachers, made it very clear to every parent what things were like around there. He said, there's only one rule. Your kids are going to learn how to read. I don't have to teach them how to read. It's kindergarten. The rule is you can't say you can't play. If I can teach them that over and over and over again, we will raise civilized human beings. You can't say you can't play. Well, there's 10 things a kindergarten teacher could do. That's one of them. But Lenny had to keep coming back to it, hour after hour, day after day. Who are you elevating? Who are you paying attention to? Who are you pointing to? And the problem with 30 kids in a class and a bureaucracy is that what we've resorted to is the easy proxy, which is who's good at football and who did well on the test. And neither one of those things earns us the kind of enrollment we seek.
Right. That's so true. It's so true. And I think as we feel, the effects of, I think, the pandemic, I often say when I'm speaking to other educators, I come alongside, I do some speaking with them and work together. And it's amazing to collaborate with other educators from all over now. And I think I often tell them, we're in a merge lane. We have to acknowledge that we're coming out of a time that was significant for people and not always easy. It wasn't traumatic for everybody. I think some people kind of took the pause and were able to take a big deep breath and find some intention in all of it, but not everybody. And so I think a lot of us are feeling a little overwhelmed. And I think the tendency to tighten in the management realm and to sort of automate everything. We even have AI. We had AI this year to choose our classrooms. And I felt conflicted about it because I think within that tightening, you lose an element of humanity. What do you say to schools that are maybe ramping up the micromanagement or the data, or are kind of pushing and urging teachers? I hear this from superintendents a lot. They're not putting their hand up to volunteer right now. I'm not seeing the same engagement that we saw before the pandemic. And there's something there. What do we do about it?
Well, it's interesting when you have an extraordinary luck of the draw and 20 great kids in your class who had wonderful home lives and are predisposed to being good at it. We take all the credit. I had a great class this year. I was a great teacher.
Yeah.
But when it doesn't turn out that way, it's harder to take the blame, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you get what you get. The bureaucracy is what the bureaucracy is. I can't change that. I'm trying. The micromanagement is what the micromanagement is.
Yeah.
Either you can use that as a platform to do your work, or you can be the victim of it. Either you can stay or you can go. If you're going to go, I get it. You're totally entitled to go. If you're going to stay, wasting your time arguing about that isn't going to help us get to where we're going. On the other hand, daring them to fire you because you did what was right for the kids, it's extremely unlikely you're going to get fired. You're just going to feel that way.
Right.
That if you can actually earn enrollment, you do have the time, not enough, but you have the time. How are you going to build an actual culture? Because here's what's still true. And I've seen the same COVID trauma you're talking about. But here's what's true. 10 years from now, when we talk to kids who are in your school and say, who's the best teacher you ever had? They're going to have a best teacher. Is it going to be you? Because my experience is the same names come up over and over again. So sooner or later, that's a choice on the teacher's part. Sooner or later, some teachers decided to lean into what it would be. So I was invited to Mr. Guillaume's 80th birthday party during the pandemic by Zoom. And I think of him, he was my third grade teacher and my sixth grade teacher. That was a really long time ago, my friend. And I think of him all the time.
Wow.
And I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
So what did he manage to do 45 years ago? Well, it's still available.
Right. Right. And I think that I love that idea of leaning in, because I don't think that it's rocket science or that it's out of reach for us. I think it's a choice. It's a posture. It's, as you say, this tension of finding that right interaction mode, often belonging cues, even like that ability to interact with people and to set the tone through our body language and the way that we light up in front of our students, and for our parents too. I think sometimes we overlook parents, and I think they're part of that journey and they're part of that relationship building. What do you say about the day-to-day interactions that we can have, those micro moments that seem so insignificant perhaps when you look at it on the surface, but deep down, I think those are the moments that build that belonging.
Well, so now we're talking about human nature, which is directly connected to marketing, something I know a little about. Human beings, after they're 3 years old, human beings care about two things. So we're talking about parents and we're talking about students. They care about affiliation and they care about status. Affiliation is, do I fit in? Am I wearing the right clothes? Who's to my left? Who's to my right? Do they like me? And status is, who's up and who's down? Did my kid get into a famous college? Right. Are they winning something? Am I winning something? Did I get picked for the team? Those are the two tools you have. You have the tool of affiliation and you have the tool of status. Who are you giving the status to? Why are you giving them status? Who are you offering affiliation to? Why are they getting affiliation? And the homogeneity of pick the kid who looks like what the media says a successful kid's supposed to be. Reward the kid who is an inch taller or a little bit better at arithmetic, and celebrate those kids. Well, yeah, you just left 20 other kids behind. Yeah. And so you get to choose. What's it like around here? What in this classroom, is it the troubled kid, the nerdy kid, the lonely kid, do they get status and affiliation? Because if they do, things are going to start to change.
I love that. We have this incredible educational assistant in our school who has been there for years and years. She's a fixture in our community, and she teaches the students to play chess. And she has one group that's learners chess. And so that's for anybody from kindergarten all the way up to grade 5. And then she has another group that's players chess. And so when they feel that they're ready and they have the skills, then they can engage in a more serious game. And it is incredible how many students enroll in that and how much affiliation comes from that, and that sense of identity and community. And she really gives space for those kids. And what's interesting is she actually had an accident that caused her some brain damage. And so she learned how to reprogram her brain. She's very, very intelligent and very math-minded. She's a knitter. She's a pattern seeker. And so she retrained her brain to do that kind of work. And what that gave her is the opportunity to learn how students learn, what it feels like to be a beginner again. And so what do you say to an educator who feels like maybe they want to do something like that, say a chess club, or they want to do something that feels a bit out of the box, and they feel scared, or they feel like, what will they think? Or they feel like that top-down squeeze with administration and the stakeholders. Like, what do you say to that teacher who's like, okay, I want to try something new?
Yeah, that's a great point. So the smallest viable audience and the minimum viable product dance together. You cannot fix the school district. You probably can't even fix the school. You might not even be able to fix the whole day in your class. But if you can get 2 kids to play 1 game of chess, you made a difference. Where is the smallest unit that you can impact? What is the smallest project you can launch? And then you get to do it again. Don't go to the principal and say, I heard about this person and I want to start a chess club. Just have 1 game of chess. And if it starts to work, then you'll have 3 games of chess. And by the time you get up to 6 games of chess, they'll ask you to start a chess club.
Right.
And so the scary part is beginning, but resistance pushes us to make it bigger in our head so that someone will say, no, okay, phew, I don't have to do it. Well, yeah, but if you made it smaller, you could do it.
So interesting. You wrote a book called Linchpin, and that dances in my head often. And I think that's essentially what you're talking about, is that idea that you don't need permission. You say that often. I feel like I quote you all the time wherever I go. But there's something really liberating about that. I went recently to my district and I said, look, we've got all these goals and we don't have one specifically for social emotional learning and for wellness for teachers. And I sort of provided a presentation and I said, this is what I think we need. And we need somebody to lead it. And I'd love to lead it. We'd love to hire you. We don't have the money. Okay. And I thought about it a bit more and I thought, you know what? I think you just do it anyway. You do it anyway. You find the space, you ask people to join. And I think there's something really liberating in that. And then from that, so many opportunities come. And I would say that kind of is the one difference between people who try things and people who don't, is like, if you don't try, you'll never know. And you'll never see what's on the other side of that. So you might as well just give it a shot.
Right. And I want to just put a pin in here. The people who are listening to this are incredibly busy, overworked, underappreciated, underpaid. I am not saying now you need to go spend more time.
Yes.
You're already spending a bunch of time. What I'm asking you to do is do less good work on the bureaucratic stuff that feels safe and do more good work on the scary stuff that feels generous.
I love that. You talk a lot about values, and I'm curious to know just broadly, because I've been thinking about values a lot. And I think that intentional ability to identify your own values, when I speak to educators all over North America, I ask them, have you done values and kind of goal setting work? And a lot will say yes, within the school setting, values as an educational organization, but often not individually. What do you think about values? Like, how important are values to decision making and habit setting and like general life design? What do you think about that?
Well, I turned it backwards. I think if it's not helping you with decision making and lifestyle, it's not a value. It's just a slogan that when we, if Johnson and Johnson has a mission statement and a value statement about maintaining the health of blah, 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 that's useless because it's not helping them make decisions. What's making decisions there is, what will I tell my boss and will this make the stock price go up? They just don't want to tell the truth, but that's how they make decisions.
Right.
So if you decide to do X instead of Y when it's difficult because of something internal, that's a value.
Right.
In most people who work in most bureaucratic school systems, the primary value is don't get in trouble. Do what you're told. Keep your head down. That's the primary value. You just don't want to say it.
Right.
So let's be clear. What's guiding your hard decisions? That's your value.
Right.
Is burnout, overwhelm, and low motivation holding your team back? Well, I help people like you in education, the corporate world, and in healthcare to regain a sense of themselves through simple life edits. All you have to do to transform your team is contact me for your next workshop or keynote.
And that's important work, I think, in everything that we do. So much of that self-leadership I found gives us the freedom to operate in the way that we want to in the professional space, as well as within our families and with our children. I think about, I've done some work around that. And I think that idea of connection and growth is tremendously important to me. And so a lot of the things, if I'm trying to make a decision between doing something or not, I think about those values as guideposts, I guess. And so that's tremendously important, I think, for decision making and then having integrity. I want to talk about this concept of standards versus obedience as well, because I think it kind of plays in. And we, in our district in British Columbia, we're quite progressive in some ways. And so we are doing some work around standard-based learning, as opposed to grades and that sort of thing. We've kind of done away with grades altogether. What's your take on that? Why is it important to build in standards versus this traditional obedience approach to education?
Give me an example of a standard that isn't a grade.
Yeah, so I think it comes down to effort. It comes down to, are you interested, curious, engaged in the learning? Is there questioning that's meaningful and derived from the student? Is there a sense of wonder that literally joy and wonder are in our curriculum as words, which sometimes is quite hard to grapple with,
right?
Because there's literally the top part of every curricular standard has the two words, big ideas. So they really are, they're big ideas. And it's not linear. So sometimes it's challenging to work with, but it's also exciting. There's autonomy built into it, which for a person like me is so delightful, because every year can be different. Every lesson can be different. You're not bound by a grade book, which is really cool.
This is great. It's going to be so hard for the teachers, and it's going to be a train wreck, and it's great. The reason is status and affiliation. Yeah, that you are part of a bureaucracy. You don't have enough time, and there's all these different learning styles, right? The parents care very much about status and grades. Mm-hmm. They push that onto the students, and the students have been taught that affiliation, belonging, comes from status and grades. Right. And now you're saying, well, actually what we're saying is we're going to look deep inside your brain and figure out what wonder could be for you and what effort could be for you. And that is what we're going to challenge you to achieve with, which is absolutely correct, except it sits in the middle of a culture that's built on a completely different hierarchy.
Yes.
And
yes,
so
exactly.
I'm rooting for this, but I hope that they are giving you the training and support you need, because this is going to be really hard. I remember gym class when I was 12, and if you can imagine a shorter, heavier, pudgier, lazier version of me with a 4-inch hair afro thing, that's who was in gym class. And kids got an A in gym because they could run around the track faster than me.
Right.
But I was trying harder than they were.
Right.
So what was the grade for exactly? Mm-hmm. On the other hand, walked down the hall to math class and I was getting an A because I could do arithmetic better than these kids. but I
Right.
wasn't trying as hard as they could.
Right.
So why was I getting an A?
Mhm.
And we figured out how to measure what was easy, even though it wasn't a useful proxy.
Mhm.
So what we need to do before we shift to what you're describing is, what's the outcome we're looking for? Well, I
Mhm.
think, and I wrote about this in Stop Stealing Dreams, we need to teach kids to solve interesting problems and to
Mhm.
lead,
Mhm.
regardless of where they are on any spectrum. Solve interesting problems and lead.
Mhm.
Because I believe if we could create a whole generation of kids that care enough to lead and care enough to solve interesting problems, our world will get better.
Hmm.
So is that what they want you to measure? I don't know what they want you to measure, but they ought to discuss it.
Yeah, it's been contentious to say the least. I think it is a big idea. And I think with anything like that, much of it is theoretical. And so it does fall on the educator, which is probably going to be reflective of some of those burnout levels, right? So there will be work ahead for sure.
Well,
I
I'm
wonder,
glad you're the one who's doing it.
well, my goodness, I'm going to try, but we come alongside, right? And I think there's something, Elizabeth Gilbert says that done is better than perfect. I think sometimes it's like, it's going to be messy, and understanding that, and not, I think the biggest challenge sometimes in education, maybe because so many of us are linear thinkers, we loved, everything that we did was valued in education. So we continued down the path. We never left school, and that's something to consider. So when we look alongside and we see teachers struggling maybe with a new idea, it's really hard, I think, for some people not to go to snap judgments, and then therefore to not compare themselves to the standard of what's happening around them or what normal is. And so that is a challenge when we're trying these big, bold new ideas.
Yeah.
Speaking of big, bold new ideas, can you talk about the Carbon Almanac? And I like this because in the context of the work that I do, whether it's in kindergarten or it's with other adults, I think you talk to the fact that everything that we do should be sort of seen as a project. And you led, and yet did not directly, I wouldn't say contribute, but you manage this amazing global project. Can you speak to that and how it relates to this idea of project-based learning as a whole?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that the era of a 40-year job is over. And it's been atomized into smaller bits. And what we're really going to end up with is a life of projects. And a project could be something like, how is this unit for 3 weeks with my classroom going to end up? Or it could be, the world needs to learn a lot more about what's happening to the climate. We can make an almanac to solve that problem.
Mm-hmm.
Projects have beginnings, they have ends, they have multiple people involved, and they might not work.
Mm-hmm.
There are standards associated with them. And when we put those pieces together with limited resources, we have a project. So in the case of the Carbon Almanac, I knew I wanted this book to be in the world. I knew I could build it all by myself, but it would take me a very long time and wouldn't be a useful metaphor for what I was trying to show, which is systems can change. So I invited some people. We ended up with 300 people, most of whom I've never met, from 40 countries around the world, online only. Everyone, including me, a volunteer. I probably worked more than most people, 10 or 12 hours a day for a year and a half, but people could come at the pace they wanted to come. Mm-hmm. We ended up writing, editing, fact-checking, illustrating, footnoting a 97,000 word almanac and publishing it without one significant error in 5 months. And I had to lead that project. I did not manage it because I didn't tell everybody what to do. I helped create the conditions for the thing to happen. So what we know about school and learning is education is power-based, top-down. Learning is always experiential. We learn when we do something. Toddlers learn to walk because they toddle. Yes. Learning how to walk is about on your own falling until you don't fall anymore. That's why everyone who ever tried to learn how to walk, if they're physically able, can walk. So when you create the conditions in a classroom for kids to learn, what we've done is led them to a place where they will engage with material, not by educating them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why math isn't the same as arithmetic. Arithmetic is really hard to educate people on. But when people choose to find joy in the math, they'll
Mm-hmm.
learn the arithmetic because it's the only way forward.
I love that. If you were setting forth, or as you set forth on a new project, I know you have so many projects that you are interested in, and I suspect it's something that kind of keeps you feeling like you're, I don't know, just like alive and part of the world. And what questions do you ask yourself as you're setting off? Because you must have guiding questions that help to sort of determine the kind of leader that you're going to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's 400 ways to answer this question. I'm going to start by this. I'm a professional manager of projects. By professional, I mean it's not personal and it needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
I've done, I'm not exaggerating, 200 useful labeled projects in my career. I have never gone over budget and I have never missed a deadline. And the reason is simple, because when you run out of time or you run out of money, you're done.
Yeah.
That's it. Saturday Night Live doesn't go on at 11:30 because it's ready. It goes on at 11:30 because it's 11:30.
Right.
And that is what a professional does.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to thrash early. I have to make sure that the size of the bucket, right? Like, so when we did the Carbon Almanac, I knew I had enough control over the physics of it to get this book done on time. But I didn't believe I could fix the climate.
Right.
And so the project was the book. Fixing the climate is the longer arc, not my project. I'm just contributing to that project.
Right. Okay.
So what we need to do if we're going to be a professional is we need to announce it's a project, understand the constraints, try to build resilience into it. What will happen when the unexpected occurs? So a simple example, if you, let's say I'm going to come visit you in British Columbia, and I don't fly for work anymore, so I can't, but let's say I was going to. The flight leaves JFK at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
When should I leave my house and how should I get to the airport? This is a project because it involves other people. It can succeed or fail. You get the idea, right?
Yes.
Well, what many people do is they say, well, I did my best. I left at 8 and then a traffic jam happened. Not my fault.
Yeah.
Oh, but you missed the flight. You didn't manage the project with resilience.
Right.
So let's get clear about what the cost is of the project failing. In your case, in your project's case, there's another flight to BC in an hour. So it's no crisis. Fine.
Right.
On the other hand, I had a friend who organized a conference in Italy, and she was the organizer. And there were 80 people there. She didn't make it because she did everything, quote, right.
Yes.
But a 5-minute snafu at the ticket gate counter meant she missed her flight by 4 minutes.
Wow.
So what could she have done? Well, what she could have done is said, where resilience lies is take my laptop, stay at the TWA hotel at the airport overnight, get as much work done as I would have gotten into the airport, and stroll over to, because it's just not worth missing the flight.
Yes.
So that's what project management is. Figure out where the resilience lies.
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said for, you talk about this pre-mortem, right? And then you talk about the rave, that idea of what I believe, and maybe you could speak to it more eloquently than I can, but that idea of the pre-project preparation for failure and then preparation for success. Is that kind of along the right lines?
Yeah, it helps us visualize because we tend to get hung up by imagining everything that could go wrong. I'm going to go into my classroom. I'm going to do what Morgane said. And then the superintendent's going to notice and they're going to fire me and it's going to be in the newspaper and I'm never going to work again. Right. That's the worst thing that could happen. So we focus on that.
Right.
And so what I challenge people to do is 2 things in writing. The first one is write the Amazon review, write the obituary, write the most glowing review you can imagine of the work. So if you're a teacher and you got 40 more years in the classroom, what are they going to say at your retirement party? Write it all down.
Great.
Versus the postmortem. It failed. Okay. Let's write down how bad it was when it failed and why it failed in detail. So now build your project so you avoid the postmortem and make it more likely you get the rave. But if you're not willing to do those things in advance, it's unlikely those things are going to happen on the other side.
I love that. And it prepares you. It sort of helps you to see those blind sides blindsided corners and the things that sort of hold us back sometimes from that success. So thank you for that. I think that's really useful in anything that we set off to do, whether it's set off with a new classroom or to start a new school. What advice would you have for educators right now as they head back into the classroom? And this could include principals as well. Maybe within the context of that post-pandemic merge lane that I sort of think about.
Well, again, I'll repeat what I said at the beginning, which is thank you. There aren't enough of you, and the people who care are the kind of people who listen to this. So thank you. I would say my advice is fight like crazy to find space. The space you need to be an educator who teaches, not one who dictates. If you can figure out how to spend an extra 3 minutes with a kid, looking them in the eye, offering them the dignity they deserve, finding out where their affiliation lies, getting them to play a game of chess, that is what people remember. I remember what Mr. Guillaume did in 1968 when Larry Uhas took the watch off his desk. And he wasn't like, I got to race back to the curriculum. He figured out how to spend 60 seconds to have a moment there that changed Larry's life and my life. And that is why we need you in the classroom. The rest of the stuff's already on YouTube.
That's true. It's that connection. Seth Godin, thank you so much for joining me today. Before we sign off, is there anything else that we should know, where to find your book, anything that you're excited about right now that you'd like to share?
Well, a long time ago, I stopped trying to sell books. So I'd much rather have people talk about these ideas. There's many of these ideas at Seth's.blog. They're all for free. And if you could bring a bunch of books to school and start a book group, I think you might be amazed at what happens. I don't even care if it's my book, but just start talking about it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate the conversation. Always inspiring.
Thank you for leading. Go make a ruckus, everybody.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Kindsight 101 with me, your host, Morgane Michael. It has been an absolute pleasure. I always learn so much, but really, I want to hear what you've learned. Please find me on social media by searching Morgane Michael and reach out. I always love to hear from people.